Morning, Nat. How are you?
Good morning, Bronwyn. I'm good. All the way from Perth.
All the way from Perth.
Beautiful day here. What's it like over there?
Yeah, it's a bit cloudy. So
Cloudy.
we've got rain and storms probably today. Yeah.
So just your normal weather.
Half of the course, yeah.
Yeah.
So today you and I are going to have a chat about standardizing routine holistic resident assessment. Profile.
Which is what PACOP is all about.
Which is what PACOP's all about. So I just thought we might have a look at acknowledging traditional owners of the country. So I'm coming from the land of the Dharawal peoples. Where are you, Nat?
Wajak Noongar.
Wajak Noongar. So just like to acknowledge the ongoing custodianship of the lands by the First Nations peoples, paying respect to our elders past and present. Beautiful piece of artwork there too.
Yeah, it is. Very nice.
So,
all right, let's get stuck into today's topic.
Yeah, so one of the things that you and I talk about a lot is how aged care is a major provider of end-of-life care.
Yes.
So
that's right. And I mean, and Bronwyn, I think, of course, everyone knows that, but I think it's becoming more and more awareness in the public that they are indeed a major provider of end-of-life care and therefore palliative care.
Yeah, because, when you look at the statistics, and I know some of them are the AIHW, it's still a couple of years in arrears, but even when you look at that, it's 160,000 deaths approximately in Australia in a year, 51% in hospitals, but like 35% are happening in aged care, in residential aged care.
So I think it's 60,000 people died in residential aged care of that number. And then, like you said, 1 in 5 of those die within, what was it, 6 months?
No.
3 months.
Yeah, 1 in 5 in 3 months. It's
3 months,
very high rate. So you've got new admissions coming in. So you may still have in the background a group of people who've been there for a very long time. But the new admissions, when they're coming in, very frail.
Yes. They are basically coming in with palliative needs.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then it's, how do we work that out? And how do we go from admission to an end-of-life care pathway? How do we manage what's in the middle there? How do we monitor what's going on with those people so that we can actually anticipate what's happening to them? So that's really where PACOP comes in, isn't it? So
I mean, I think everyone watching would know that, the basics of PACOP and palliative aged care outcomes program. And really what we want to talk about today is the routine, standardized, holistic care that PACOP provides.
Yeah. And, we've got the two programs. So there's 2 parts to the program.
Yep.
We have the profile collection, which is really what we want to focus on today, and the outcomes collection. So both of them have a systematic framework and process.
That's right.
Routine.
And we're not going to, I think, Bronwyn, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not going to actually talk about the
outcomes,
the assessment tools as much in the collections today. We just want to really focus on the program and what it brings to care, which is routine care assessment, standardization, and holistic assessment.
Yes.
All of which we know are absolutely essential ingredients to providing the best possible care and improving outcomes.
Yeah, that's
regardless whether we're on profile or outcomes, we are all about improving care, which is improving outcomes for residents and families.
And the profile collection, the thing about the profile collection is that, conceptually, because we're talking about conceptual stuff here rather than the actual tools, like you said, the purpose of the profile collection is actually to develop a profile about the resident. So it's that, how do we do this? What do we do to be able to achieve that profile, the information about the person? And the profile is not just about the individual resident. It can also be about the status of the aged care home. If you've got 50% of your residents have been assessed in profile as having palliative care needs, that's going to speak to the really high level of acuity of what's happening to you.
And staffing requirements and ongoing planning, service planning. And then, of course, behind all of that, as more and more organisations come on board with PACOP, what we're going to be able to create is a national profile. And
Yes.
that is so important for all types of reasons, which all point to identifying needs, gaps in the massive aged care sector that we have in Australia, and working together to provide better care and to be able to fill those spots, fill those gaps of care, which is going to be highlighted in the national profile data.
That's right. And the other thing I think about the national data is, at the moment we can say, and the AIHW tells us that we've got this huge number of people dying in aged care, but how are they dying? Are they dying well? Is
Yes.
there, is it an ad hoc approach? And
that's where the focus of this morning tea talk comes on board. So,
Yes.
standardizing, using standardized assessments in a routine and robust framework is going to be able to give us all of that information.
Yeah. So talking about standardizing,
yep,
that standardization has got the validated tools. I mean, like what? So let's just unpack this a little bit. What makes PACOP? How is PACOP standardizing things? What are the features of PACOP that create standardization?
Well, I think the first point, Bronwyn, is that we're standardizing it in that all organisations that use PACOP are using the same assessment process and assessment tools. That in itself is huge.
Yes. So that's going to be a nationwide approach.
Yes.
We're starting off small. There's over 3,000 aged care homes in Australia. And
yes.
the program will ultimately reach all of those aged care homes at some point, and hopefully embed the practice into their care. That's kind of the aim, the long-term aim. So we've got the standardized approach. Then we've got the standardized validated tools as well.
Which is so important, because we're using the same, we're introducing the same assessment tools into aged care as they're using in the palliative care services, specialist palliative care services that they use with PACOP.
Yes.
And that's really
as well.
important.
Those tools are also ANAC tools. So, you're using, so ANAC obviously is a standardized funding model. So we've taken some of those tools from ANAC, and we've taken some of the tools from specialist pal care. So it means the ability to have a conversation within aged care and within palliative care about aged care, pal care becomes quite phenomenal,
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And
I
mean, having standardized tools really helps to the continuity of care for people, whether they're patients or residents, transferring across different settings. While they're on this journey, they are being assessed using the exact same assessment
every
tools.
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the obvious is too, if you're assessing a resident, on a regular in a regular time frame, you're then developing a trend. You'd be able to monitor what's happening to the resident from one period to the next period. So I guess the thing that begins to happen there is, we often talk about the aged care lottery and, or postcode lottery. So people who live in some areas don't have the same benefits as others do around services, but this creates a standardization regardless of that.
Yeah, that's right.
Wherever.
And we're also comparing, apples with apples, not apples with oranges.
Yes.
And not comparison for the point of who's better than who, comparison so that we can all work together towards improving, which is what all about, benchmarks in healthcare are.
Improvement. Yeah. And then, of course, this all ties in with the aged care quality standards. So, when we're talking about standardization, aged care quality standards is another thing of standardization. ANAC is all of this is starting to tie into the bigger picture of the aged care reforms and aged care standardization in Australia. So it just fits in beautifully into that.
And standardizing something is being putting a process in that you can measure quality.
Yes.
So, by bringing in standardization, you can measure the quality of care and improve the quality of care to come up to the required level.
Yes.
Which, when we're talking about residents, there should be no limit to how high we are aiming.
That's right. And, the other thing about when we're looking at the information that Profile collects, it does also consider the people who are in regional and remote areas, because we understand how in the metro areas you've got so many resources, but in those regional and rural and remote areas, the resources are very different.
Yes.
So this program has the ability to build the standardized, with the standardized framework, to build the sustainability that can happen in those aged care homes where they're doing amazing work.
Yeah. But and that also feeds into Bronwyn, like staff will often change their place of work.
Yes.
But if the same standardization assessment tools are being used for residents, they're able to take those skills with them and use them wherever they go with their work.
Yeah.
And it's like nurses are moving across hospitals and knowing how to do basic OBS.
That's right.
This is OBS for palliative care. So once people become familiar with them, they will be able to use them wherever they are.
It's that whole transferable skill.
Yes.
As well. So you kind of, the approach is not only standardizing the care of the resident, but it's standardizing the work approach and the knowledge approach and the skill set.
Yes.
Yeah.
And thereby empowering and supporting staff, really, because they feel confident in the tools that they're using.
Exactly. And then the benefit of that too, I mean, this is certainly something I've actually observed as well, is that the specialist PAL care teams that are working with residential aged care, GPs, the level of confidence around the assessments is beginning to change. So this is, I know you've been working with groups that you've seen that in as well. And the feedback I'm getting from specialist PAL care, particularly if they're doing something like palliative care needs surrounding, is that the referrals that they're receiving are much clearer. They are much more appropriate.
Yes.
Yeah, and so there's less of that reactive, I think they're dying, and it might be it might be an illness, might be a change, but not necessarily palliative care. But often when there's that change, specialist PAL care are referred to because the staff are so worried that this person could be dying. But now they've got the skill set to look at what's going on with these standardized tools and actually pick up that this is not necessarily a specialist PAL care. This is maybe a GP referral.
Yeah. And that is such a good point, Bron, and that really leads us on to the next part of this topic, which is routine. So we've established that the standardization is so important, but obviously equally as important is the routine, the continual assessing, the ongoing thing in a standardized way.
Yes.
So I mean, routine assessment is what keeps the program ticking along.
Yes.
And it adds, and it is essential to the program because, of course, you can't assess someone once and then that's it, one and done. People change from day to day.
Yeah,
how are we going to pick it up? It doesn't matter. This applies to anything. Everybody changes all of the time, let alone talking about our residents in a they're coming into aged care because they've already started to deteriorate.
That's exactly right. They're so frail anyway.
Yeah. So routine, I mean, and, we're talking about the profile. So, the process for the profile or the routine is on admission, entirely appropriate. Talking back to what you talked about earlier, Bron, about they're coming in already, and often, and it's that huge percentage of them are going to be dying within the first 6 months.
That's right.
So we have to do it on admission and then at 3 monthly time points thereafter.
Yes.
And 3 monthly time points. I mean, I don't know about you, Bron, but I've had some services that say, look, we only do our care plan reviews 6 monthly. So it would be great if we could just do the profile 6 monthly. But we have to say, you really need to, if you want to participate in the PACOP program, it really does need to be done 3 monthly. And the reasons for that are because this is a national program and a national data set. So if everyone needs to be doing it the same way, because then when we start to benchmark and have those sort of reports and gatherings, you need to be able to all be doing the same thing, because otherwise
it's not able to be measured.
It's not able to be measured and benchmarked.
Yeah.
And also the big. Oh, sorry, Bron, you go.
No, I was just going to say the Royal Commission into Aged Care Quality and Safety. When you have a look at some of the reports, their recommendations were that resident reviews needed to be happening at least 3 monthly.
Yeah.
I think when you're talking about the frailty of people that we're talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
20% of them are dying within 3 months.
Yes.
A 3 monthly assessment is a minimum requirement, really.
Yes. And I mean, the other thing is we operate on a 6-monthly report cycle.
Yes.
So if you were to only do your profile assessment once every 6 months, you would be missing out on all of that information in your reports. You know, in one reporting cycle, you may only be doing one profile assessment on a resident. So, you know, it's really important that we stick to the 3-monthly time point. And the other thing we all know is that once you're familiar with doing the profile assessment, the 3-part profile assessment, you're really looking at 10 minutes, you know, I mean, apart from the SAS where, you know, the longer, the beautiful conversation you can have with the resident, the better. But, you know, you really could do it in 10 minutes.
Or even less, because I think that conversation is the thing that takes the time.
Oh, absolutely.
You know everything about your resident. The rest of that assessment is fairly easy to do if you're monitoring them closely, which, you know, I know is happening in aged care. The staff are really all over the residents and what's happening to them.
And a 10-minute investment of clinical time every 3 months for the absolute wealth of information and the ongoing robust screening of residents so that we do not miss anything. It's a no-brainer. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't want to do it.
That's right. So now there's also other things that aged care homes are collecting data-wise. So you've got the National Mandatory Aged Care Quality Indicators. We also talked about the SIRS, you know, there's the SIRS information. So the quality indicators, they're just about to go to 1st of April, so that's Saturday. In those 11, probably about 8 of them are tools that actually help to assess geriatric syndromes. So when we look at what happens to our residents, to aged care, and how they die and what happens with their illnesses, there's lots of complexity, there's lots of comorbidities. And in the background, you've got this geriatric syndrome process that's happening, which is causing the residents to deteriorate. That information is already collected on a monthly basis by aged care homes. The weights, the falls, the skin integrity, there's a whole lot of information that is collected and sometimes just feels quite arbitrary. When you look at the profile and you've done those assessments actually inform your profile assessment tools, and you start to make sense of the data that is routinely being collected. So it's another standardized process we were talking about before. And it is picking up on the changes, these subtle changes in the residents. So for the first time in aged care, we're beginning to pick up subtleties and trends. And that whole thing that we were never quite sure about how to articulate before a resident becomes end of life. But we know that they're changing. We now have A, the evidence from quality indicators informing B, the tools that are in profile, and creating a context and a picture that we can then talk to the residents about if they're able to, families and GPs and specialist palliative care. And we have such a different insight into what's going on with that resident before they become palliative and end of life. It's just phenomenal.
And I mean, and by doing it routinely, 3-monthly, we're picking up on that, as you say. But, you know, a routine, you know, the process, the profile routine is 3-monthly. And what we're really talking about is a process. So this is the process. You know, every organization, every successful business in the world, healthcare, you know, whether you're in healthcare or you know, in IT or anything at all, it needs a robust system of procedures and processes.
It does.
And healthcare is no different. And the reason why is because you put that in place and then it's something that has to be adhered to, which means it gets done. Whereas if you don't have that process or that routine in place, you know, people get busy and things fall by the way because
that's right.
And before you know it, you're not doing it at all, whatever that thing is. So routine is just a process, and processes and procedures are necessary wherever you work.
That's right. And this is part of the reason why we can say hand on heart, you follow this program, you're not going to, none of your residents are going to miss out. Every single resident will be reviewed. Every single change will start to be evaluated and understood. And then the care planning, the anticipatory care planning instead of reactive, becomes very much more of a practice that you have. So your business as usual is not going to be reactive, people are dying. It's going to be proactive, anticipatory. I've done my routine assessments. I can see what's happening. I can talk to families. We can do lots of planned care. And it just has a sense of calm. Because
because they're so busy, you know, we know
you
The
know,
nursing
and
staff in aged care are so strapped all the time. It would be so easy for them to, they're so busy with wounds and medications and families and all the amazing things they do. Without something there as a process, it would be so easy for it to drop off. So this is
yes.
really like a reassurance to them that we stick to this program and we're not going to miss anything.
That's right. And it's going to pick up on a whole lot of holistic assessments, which we'll talk about in a second as well. And the other thing I wanted to just say, I just want to talk about the SIRS information. That's a little bit of a thing that I have a soapbox on, if you like. The SIRS looks like, you've got serious incidents and you need to review them and the risk around them. And oftentimes there's this non-pharmacological approach or medication approach, and it's trying to work out what's going on with the resident. Something that's not always well monitored or understood is that this could actually be part of a deterioration, part of a terminal event for the resident. So I think, we talk about the deteriorating resident tool, which is part of Profile. So you do your routine at minimum 3 monthly assessments. When your residents are deteriorating, a SIRS event, for example, is probably a really good idea to do a deteriorating resident tool as well, because when we're talking about picking up changes, if you're doing the minimum 3 monthly reviews, that's quite a bit of time between assessments. And if you
that's right. And people don't deteriorate on the 3 monthly mark.
Yeah, they don't. They're not continuing.
So that is why we introduced the deteriorating resident
tool.
I mean, anytime you're concerned, like you said, Bonnie, if it's an event that they have to report anyway, but even outside of that, a carer comes to a nurse and says, look, I'm worried about Mr. Smith. He's just not quite right. Grab your deteriorating resident tool, go and do the assessment,
very quick assessment.
It's going to help you focus as to, okay, what are we looking at here? Is it looking like he has palliative needs? Yes, okay, or no. Alternatively, no, he's just unwell. He might have a cold. We'll get the GP, and whatever it is, it really just helps focus. Just sometimes when a resident is just a little bit off, it's hard to know sometimes where to start.
That's
okay,
right.
What do I look at? Do your deteriorating resident tool. That will either help you rule out that he has palliative needs, or alternatively, it will highlight that he does. And it really gives you a great place to start.
Yes. And I mean these tools, the other thing I just want to say too, is these tools work for people who have dementia. And so, you're often working quite difficultly there because there's not that same level of input or information coming from the resident themselves. It's a lot more deductive work that has to happen from a care perspective. This Profile has, this built-in logic that helps staff to work through their assessments and to make some thinking, deductive reasoning. And I think that if you've got a group of people who've got cognitive impairment and they're not easy to be able to understand what's happening, these tools can be very useful that way too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So just looking at that holistic care. So,
can you make that wheel spin, Bronwyn?
Would I love to? Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So, when I was looking up, what does holistic mean? Because we use that phrase and we use the word really easily. Holistic.
So what does holistic mean to you, Bronwyn? So before you looked it up, what do you understand as holistic care?
So it was always like psychosocial, spiritual, family, how you fit in the world. And then you kind of think, well, how does that work in residential care when we're talking about holistic assessments? And then I went and had a look at all the tools that we do use and took that concept and took the tools. And then I picked out the things that actually match that whole perspective. And so in doing that process, we have the ability to look at families and care for families and work out what is their needs. So, a resident comes with a family group, and I acknowledge that there are people that don't have family and are under the custodianship of the they have their wards of the state, if you like. But if the resident comes with family, we have the ability with Profile to also look at family's needs. We obviously are looking, the resident is central to all of this. We are able to monitor their activity, their performance, their function. We're looking at psychosocial needs. We have the ability to pick up the resident's voice and talk to them and have them respond and talk about what is worrying them and distressing them. We have the ability to monitor frailty, and the frailty is not just about physical frailty, it's cognitive frailty too. And we've never been able to do that really in aged care. The tools that have been available to monitor cognition are really more used in the context of long-term assessment, geriatrics, and so forth. This is the Rockwood Clinical Frailty Scale is picking up this frailty for staff and helping them to identify when they say, oh, we think there's some changes happening cognitively. This tool will help identify that as well. We're doing advanced care planning, and we're checking on that regularly. We don't necessarily say you need to use this tool, but we're saying, please, when you're doing this review of your resident, check your advanced care planning and make sure everything's up to date and that the goals are there.
And that's important, like we don't do it once.
No,
we don't. That's not a conversation that should happen once. It should be
no.
an ongoing and something that the resident feels free to change, to talk about, and by asking them, we give them permission to do that.
That's right. And like when you talk to the Advanced Care Australia people, they will say this is not a single conversation, just like you've just said. That this is an ongoing review, because we change the goalposts, we change our expectations as our illnesses progress and as we age. And as the world changes for us. So we should be able to talk about this more frequently. Goals of care will change as well. And then,
holistic care is gold standard care.
Yes.
In healthcare. But sometimes it does seem to be a bit of lip service. If you're in a busy acute setting in a hospital, there isn't really time for holistic care. But one of the benefits of residential aged care is that you can form those relationships with the resident and the family, and it just it's so important that they are included in the care that is provided to the resident. And that's why our tool that assess our problem severity score for family carer just is so valuable, and will bring a wealth of, it's like a depth of assessment to provide the resident with the best possible care.
That's right. That lip service, we can actually abolish the lip service, because we have these processes that make us do a deep dive, and we are asking those more difficult things, I guess, and exploring things in a much deeper way.
Yeah.
So I think we can say, because I needed to check that for myself, we can say, hand on heart, this program provides holistic care facilitation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess, in summary, these are all the things that are why we love Profile. It is such an amazing part of this program. It is developed specifically for aged care. This is the part of the program that when we were working initially in the early parts of the piloting of this program in aged care, this is where the greatest amount of change happened. This is where the learning came from aged care, and where the listening came from, listening to what aged care needs were. And in the collaboration, this is this extraordinary program, part of the program that's been built.
Yeah, absolutely. That's 100% right. And I think once people use the Profile and familiar with Profile, I really think they're going to, they will love it just as much as we do.
Yeah.
Because, it most importantly, it does improve outcomes for residents, but equally it's supporting the staff to deliver excellent care.
Yes. And it's just making sense of everything that they are doing already.
Yes.
And putting palliative care eyes on things that they may never have really thought about were palliative before. Yeah.
And the other thing about Profile is it is such a streamlined process.
Yes.
So it really is achievable for all aged care homes, regardless of their staffing, resourcing, all that type of thing. It really is achievable.
It is achievable.
And that's so important, because, that is something that differs greatly between organisations.
Yeah.
Oh, we have a question. Yes, Janelle?
I have had a question on one of the panel. Hi, everyone. Had a quick question come through to the panelists, which you're busy and chatting, so I didn't want to interrupt you. They've just someone said it sounds too good to be true. Is there criteria that our aged care home has to fit to start using the Profile?
Absolutely not. It's available to all.
Yeah.
Not only is it available to all, it is very well supported by the PACOP team to embed it in any aged care home.
Yeah.
with training and ongoing support from us.
Yep. The only criteria is reach out and contact us.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure you're going to put that up on a slide. Thank you. Thanks so much for answering that.
Yeah, I don't know. Are there there's not any other questions? I don't know, but were there any?
Do we have contact details, Bron, on the next slide?
Yes, we do. Sorry. Here we go. So if you have a look at that, you can see that we've got morning tea talks. These morning tea talks get put onto our YouTube channel. They're also at the bottom of this slide. You've got access to our email, which is at pacop@universityofwollongong.edu.au. And there's our website as well.
And we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. We are raring to go. There's a whole team of us that are looking forward to meeting you and working with you. Cool.
All right, I think that wraps it up, Bron.
Thanks, Nat. Cool.
Oh, thanks, Bron. Thanks for watching, guys.
Thanks
See you next
everybody for
time.
joining us. Okay then. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.